Okay. Okay, so I think we will start then. So hello, hello everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, maybe in some cases. Hello and welcome to Asia Pacific Introductory Session number 1 for the Edinburgh process for subnational and local governments on the development of the Convention on Biological Diversity post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. It's a bit of a long name, but we hope we could actually explain to you detail about this process that we are involved at the moment today in this session, so that at the end of the session, you will have a clear idea of what we are doing. So I am Togo Uchida from ICLE Japan, and I will be chairing this regional information session together with my co-chair, Teru. Teru, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Togo. Hello, everyone. I'm Teru Kisuna from Aichi Prefecture, and I will co-chair this session on behalf of GOALS, the group of leading subnational government toward Aichi biodiversity targets, a partner of this Edinburgh process. I share that this Asian Pacific session is simultaneously translated into Japanese, and Japanese voice is streamed by GoToMeeting. So therefore, I'd like to request every speaker to talk a little slower than previous sessions for other 3 reasons. And during the question time, I will toss questions posted to GoToMeeting chat in Japanese. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this is a bit of an experimental process that we are engaged at the moment. So hopefully we will have this go through without any technical problem. So let me also introduce our moderator for today's session, John Moult and Suzanne Campbell from Scottish Government. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself? Maybe John?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm John Moult, work as an international biodiversity policy manager with the Scottish Government, and together with Sue have been working on developing the Edinburgh process.
Okay, great. Sue, please.
Yeah, and I'm Sue. As John said, I work with him in the Scottish Government's, I work in the Biodiversity Unit, John works in the Marine Unit, and we're both acting as international policy officers for Scottish Government. And we're really pleased to have developed with all of our partners this Edinburgh process for feeding into the post-2020 framework development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John and Sue. So briefly, I would like to first briefly introduce about the aim of this session. So this session is to take you through what we are calling the Edinburgh process, and to explain how you can contribute to the development of, first, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, second, updated subnational plan of action, and third, the Edinburgh Declaration. So formally, this event was scheduled to take place in Edinburgh from 1st to 3rd of April 2020, but as this has changed due to COVID-19. And now we will be holding this as an online consultation process, and therefore we have this setup that you are participating right now. Now, this is a very important event on the roadmap to COP15, as it is considered as an official convention of biological diversity consultation on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So the outputs will be taken to the SBI, the subsidiary body on implementation meeting, which is scheduled to happen in August. So far, we had 3 regional introductory sessions already conducted. And the first one was in Europe, North America. Second one was in Africa. Third one was yesterday in South America. And our session today is Asia Pacific, and it will be the last of the global round of regional introductory session. And as we say, save the best for last. I hope we can live up to this word and successfully conduct Asia Pacific session. And before we go further into detail, I would like to invite Sue for some housekeeping information. So, Sue.
Thank you, Togo. I'd just like to remind everybody that if you're not participating in the discussion, could you please keep your microphones muted, as this will help us to reduce background noise. We'll be asking for questions at certain set points throughout the presentation. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat function of the Zoom window, or you can raise your hand at the appropriate slide and we can invite you to ask your question then. If you pose your question in the chat window, and if there are a lot of questions that we can't answer, then within the time frame, then we'll be able to address those after the meeting. Thank you, Togo.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sue. I think that is pretty straightforward. And let me add that for Japanese participants who are listening Japanese simultaneous translation, please send your questions through the chat box of GoToWebinar, and Teru will pick up those and share it to us here in the Zoom platform that you are listening at the moment. So this is a bit of experimental procedure, but I'm very excited to be part of this. So without further ado, let us begin. So first, we have welcome remarks from Scottish Government, Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham. So Sue, over to you, please.
Thank you. As Togo has mentioned, this was due to take place as a physical face-to-face meeting in Edinburgh, and the Scottish Government Cabinet Secretary for the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform, Miss Rosanna Cunningham, MSP, would have liked to have addressed you in person at that event, to highlight how the development of the post-2020 framework and the role of subnational and local governments is a priority for Scotland. However, as in common with other countries across the world, we are dealing with the international crisis of COVID-19, and so have had to focus all our efforts on addressing its impact. Therefore, Ms. Cunningham unfortunately can't participate in this process today. But on behalf of Scottish Government, I would like to thank all of you for participating in these online sessions. We're delighted that although the workshop that had been planned to take place in Edinburgh can't go ahead, that we've found a way to continue this important work. Biodiversity is under serious threat across the globe, and this is an international challenge. It therefore requires an international solution. And we know that subnational and local governments play a vital role in protecting biodiversity. And so it's absolutely right that the views of that level of authority and also the expertise that we have helps to inform future action. So Scotland is delighted to be leading this consultation process along with our partners. And we want to thank you again for taking part. We look forward to working with all of you as we move forward in protecting the richness and diversity of our planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, for reading out the message from Cabinet Secretary Ms. Rosanna Cunningham. I would like to use this opportunity to thank the Scottish Government for pulling this together in such a difficult time. In this situation, subnational local governments are under constant pressure to make immediate response. And from that viewpoint, I know how difficult it is for the Scottish Government to pursue this proceeding, and even actually making it better in terms of allowing more participants from around the globe unless otherwise might have been difficult if we had a physical meeting as Sue and the Scottish Government originally planned. So thank you for your tremendous effort, and I hope this situation will improve soon for the Scottish people also. Okay, so we also have a short opening statement from CBD from Ms. Jyoti Martha Phillip, Divisional Director at CBD Secretariat on Edinburgh process. Can you put on the video, please? Thank you.
Dear participants, on behalf of the Acting Executive Secretary, I would like to thank the governments of Scotland and the United Kingdom as organisers of this web consultation for allowing me to share a few words with you from the perspective of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I would also like to thank ICLEI and Regions 4 for their support to this process. This consultation arose from a lesson the Convention learned about 10 years ago. The campaign for life on Earth cannot be won without the full participation of all levels of government, from federal to national to subnational and local. And cities increasingly are part of the problem, but also the solution. Let's consider some facts. By 2030, nearly two-thirds of the world's population will be living in cities, tripling the urban coverage, which stands today at 3% to 9%. Recent research indicates that 16% of existing key biodiversity areas will be impacted by this urban expansion within the next 10 years. This will have a serious impact on biodiversity. However, cities are also a source of innovation in transport, industry, and medicine, and even agriculture. So thereby, this could have a positive impact on nature. Since 2007, the CBD Secretariat has been working with parties, UNO agencies, and international organizations, networks and associations of subnational and local governments to address this realization. And since 2008, parallel summits have been regularly held at the Conference of the Parties. In 2010, at COP10, a plan of action for the engagement of subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities was endorsed. The Global Partnership and the advisory committees started working. Regular updates and publications on this work have been provided since through Nature articles, NUCA, and CBOs. Subnational and local action is essential for reasons such as harmonization of policies and resources across all levels of government, management of ecosystems and natural resources, and productive land and seascapes, as well as connectivity of protected areas, often fall to subnational governments. Urban-rural linkages, teleconnections related to food and water security, fiber, energy, and health are often managed at subnational and local levels. Urban expansion and sprawl itself will affect key biodiversity areas, but the consumption footprint of cities goes much beyond. We're just beginning to measure and test their governance. The post-2020's ambitious goals can only be met with the full support and engagement of local and subnational governments. We hope and count on your support. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, I think that was a very good overview of Jyoti clarifying the importance of subnationals and also how the cities can actually act proactively into this agenda and to be a solution rather than being an issue to solve the issue of global biodiversity loss. To the next slide. As we have been this Edinburgh process has been led by Scottish Government. but it has been also developed through the input and support of the Edinburgh Process partners, which you are looking at it in the screen at the moment. We would therefore like to take this opportunity to invite the parties' partners to highlight why they are involved in this important process and what their hopes and aims are for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. To begin with, we have a short video message from Aichi Governor, Mr. Omura. Can you put this video first, and then Teru, you would follow that afterwards. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Hideaki Omura, Governor of Aichi Prefecture in Japan. It's my great pleasure to co-host the Asia-Pacific session of the Edinburgh process. Aichi hosted COP10 in 2010. COP10 adopted the Aichi biodiversity targets as a global goal for 2020 and created the plan of action on subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities for biodiversity. It's our role as subnational governments to take action to conserve biodiversity. Looking beyond 2020, we must expand our initiatives even further. This is why I worked with other subnational governments and established the group of leading subnational governments toward Aichi biodiversity targets in 2016. Since then, we have been promoting subnational government initiatives. The world is currently fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to thank the Scottish Government for organizing this global conference and providing a venue for subnational and local governments to share our voices on the post-2020 framework. I declare my support for the Edinburgh process. I hope that we in the Asia-Pacific region can generate a lot of input and deliver a united voice to COP15. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you very much for that very strong statement by Governor Omura. Teru, do you have anything to add on this?
Oh, yes, thank you. Governor said so little about goals, so I add something about goals. It now consists of 9 members from 7 countries, including Yangon province in Korea and Jiangsu province in China. It has been taking action in COP13, COP14 on the subsidiary body meetings, also open-ended working group, collaborating with regions for ICRE and the European Committee of Regions, and also the Secretary of CBD. I'd like to thank such a global cooperative atmosphere among subnational and local governments in the world. You can find more about goals in the video album in Attendify. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, for that. Okay, so we move on to Renata. She's an advisory committee of subnational governments for biodiversity. Renata, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Toby. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. Like Teru very well said, I'm Renata Gomez, and I'm speaking on behalf of Regions 4, which is an association of subnational governments working together in the fields of biodiversity, climate change, sustainable development. We are currently also coordinating, together with the government of Quebec, the Advisory Committee on Subnational Governments and Biodiversity, which is a platform created by the Convention on Biological Diversity to channel the perspective and views of regions around the world. the consultation process that we began earlier this week is very important for both local and subnational governments, as both our introductory speakers very well said, and Mr. Omura as well. We at Regions 4 and together with other partner organizations that are present here today, such as the European Committee of the Regions, the group of leading subnational governments led by the Aichi government, ICLEI, of course, we have been working and advocating towards the adoption of a stepped-up decision at the next COP15 that can safeguard the legacy of the milestone decision 10/22 to ensure that regions and local governments can continue to have the means and the support they need to do their part and contribute to the main goal of stopping biodiversity loss. So our aspiration today, aim for this process, is to strengthen the message that subnational and local governments are essential partners in the materialization of the post-2020 goals for biodiversity. So we have been working, like I said, to secure partnership, but now is more important than ever that working on the field as cities, as subnational or regional governments, join us in the support of this message, so we can strengthen it in front of the convention. I thank you all for your attention, and I'll remain attentive to respond to any further questions on what we do and how to support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. I just realized you have chaired the South America session, right? So sorry about my early statement about keeping the best to the last. I'm sure your session was very, very good also. Thank you very much for that introductory note. Let's move on to Roberto. We have Roberto from European Committee of the Regions. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Togo. Greetings to everyone from Brussels. My name is Roberto Rinaldi, and I work at the European Committee of the Regions. The European Committee of the Regions is the official voice of cities and regions, which means local and subnational governments in the policy-making process of the European Union. Local and subnational governments are responsible in the European Union of 70% of the implementation of European legislation. It is therefore very important for us, Committee of the Regions, but more generally for the European cities and regions, to participate to the Edinburgh process and to make sure that our voice is heard at the COP15. We need a new biodiversity framework that recognizes the role of local and subnational governments in both the development, in the implementation, and in the monitoring of biodiversity action. And we need also your support and the support of all local and regional authorities, of all local and subnational governments in the Edinburgh process to achieve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you so much for that input also. It's very good to have all of these key subnational local government associations and groups all together working towards the same goal. And I think this is the whole purpose of this process. So thank you very much for that. And finally, ICLEI, where I belong, I would toss this to Ingrid for introductory note from ICLEI. Ingrid, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I am unmuted. And thank you very much, Togo. And on behalf of ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, who represents more than 1,750 cities and subnational governments globally, I'm very honored to be part of this very important process. And we thank the Government of Scotland for taking this initiative on behalf of local and subnational governments. ICLEI has a very long history of advocating for the voice of local and subnational governments in the CBD. And indeed, Governor Uhuru will remember that we were here in 2010 when the current decision on local and subnational governments, Decision 1022, was adopted in Nagoya. This process is a very important milestone in the development of a new global biodiversity framework by the CBD. And so it's very, very important, as both Renata and Roberto have mentioned, that the subnational and local governments make their voice heard so that we can ensure that it is mainstreamed and taken up in the new global biodiversity framework, and that we will have a strong and stepped up dedicated decision on the role of these levels of government in the new framework. Thank you very much, and I look forward to all the important discussions.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I just realized that I have been myself talking quite fast, and I just want to check with Teru whether if the interpretation is okay. Is the speed okay? Do you require us to speak a bit slower?
I think they are very kind enough. Thank you.
Okay. Let me remind myself again later on if I'm speaking too fast. Anyways, let us move on to the next slide. And I would like to invite Sue again, and she will be explaining about the background of Edinburgh process and the outline of what is included in the process using the next few slides. So over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Togo, and thanks to all our partners for setting out the importance of subnational, regional and local governments within this Edinburgh process. As I alluded to, the rapidly changing situation with COVID-19 has meant that we have had to change our plans quite significantly to deliver this engagement of subnational and local governments into the post-2020 framework development. So originally planned as a 3-day workshop at our beautiful botanic gardens, which I know many of you were planning to attend, with our partners, we've now been through several different plans before settling on this format of the Edinburgh process. The format is completely online and will include a traditional consultation process in which we're gathering written responses to the consultation. There is also a range of online meetings, of which this is one, and we will also be conducting thematic webinars. I will tell you a little bit more about those as I talk, but we hope that this online approach will allow you all to fully participate in the process, even if we can't be together in the beautiful city of Edinburgh. The Edinburgh process timeline that we have developed is set out here. And obviously it runs right up to COP15 in China in 2021. The timeline presented on your screen outlines the more important milestones, the first of which is registration on Attendify. And so you've already done that to participate in the information session, so I congratulate you all on achieving that milestone. I hope everyone's had a chance to look at the online consultation documents, and I'm sure everybody has read through the zero draft document of the post-2020 framework, which was issued in January by the CBD. The online sessions held across this week will be followed by a set of thematic webinars hosted across May and early June, and we will be having a regional feedback sessions in late June. That all precedes the submission of the final report of the Edinburgh process being submitted to upcoming CBD meetings. I mentioned there the thematic webinars. We have set out a programme of 4 webinars, and these will complement our online introductory sessions and our feedback sessions. So over the next 5 weeks, participants will be able to take part in these sessions. They're being coordinated and run with our Edinburgh partners, and these allow for more technical discussions that might inform your responses to the consultation. This is an opportunity for knowledge exchange and knowledge sharing, and the outputs created through these sessions will also form an integral part of the Edinburgh Process report, which we're submitting to the CBD. All of the links, these will be conducted through Zoom, so all of the links for these sessions will be available through the Attendify app, and we'll also be recording these sessions through our YouTube channel. I'll now move forward to let you know about the digital platforms that we're using. Obviously, you've all registered on Attendify, and this is our main platform for sharing information about the process. The app is free to use, as you're aware, and it can be accessed through smartphone or through a desktop computer on your browser. The smartphone app has actually more functionality. Everyone attending this information session, as I say, should be using Attendify, and we encourage you to use it on a regular basis. We'll be posting information such as the schedule, there's speaker information, there's information about our partner organisations. We have links to the consultation documents. We have a link to our YouTube video channel and also a Twitter feed link, so that if you do use Twitter, you can use our Twitter handle and these link into Attendify. The Twitter handle is #post2020Edinburgh. And you can keep up to date using this app on our sessions and any changes that we might need to make or add to the process. The advantage of this app is that it has a social media function. So we're using this to generate an Edinburgh Process community. We really want you all to be involved in this process. And if you go to the activity stream in Attendify, you can post messages and you can comment upon and you can like posts. In using the smartphone app, you can also directly connect to other participants. So if you've heard something interesting from a speaker, you can connect with them directly to follow up on a question or issue. So please do use this app, as we will be sharing information about the Edinburgh process through it. I mentioned our YouTube channel, and as part of the process, we're also sharing the videos such as that of Governor Amura on our channel. You'll be able to access this through the Attendify app. One of the videos we have available is an information video on the evidence base for the post-2020 framework, which has kindly been recorded for us by Andy Purvis from IPBES. And it's a really informative video, so I do recommend that you watch that. We've also got recordings with more detail on each of the Edinburgh partners that you've heard from today. So if you want to find out more, please do use the YouTube channel. We'll be posting recordings of the information sessions and the thematic webinars on this channel. And so you'll be able to keep yourself up to date if you miss any of the sessions. If you need any help with the technology, please do contact the Edinburgh Process team. There's an email address which will be shown at the end of this presentation. And if you contact us, we'll help you where we can. Thank you very much. And I hand you back to Togo.
Thank you, Sue.
You're on mute, Togo.
Togo?
Excuse me, sorry. Sorry about that. So thank you, Sue, for that. And I'll be explaining this slide, which explains about the outline of the current session that you are all participating. So as I have mentioned in the opening few slides, this has been developed to introduce the consultative process for subnational and local governments on their role in the CBD's post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So output of this consultation will feed directly into the development of the post-2020 framework and the associated subnational government planning for the next 10 years. There are 3 ways or processes that you can participate. And we will introduce you the outline of each process and the ways for you to engage in this process and also to answer any questions you might have. So at the end of the session, we hope that all participants are clear with what they can do to be part of the process and therefore move forward to further making contribution to the process. Next slide, please. So we move on to this section's questions and answers. So if anyone has any questions so far, you could either use the raise hand function or type in directly into the chat box. So any questions so far about the overall Edinburgh process and overall timeline or identifying app? So far, maybe no one, everyone is clear maybe?
I don't see any questions in the chat, and I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, there's one question. Isn't the zero draft already passed as the OEWG2 is revising it?
I think that's just what we're coming on to in the second session. So I think we'll be able to address that question as we talk about the timeline and process for the post-2020 framework.
Okay, great. Any questions in the Japanese participants? Teru, are you receiving any comments?
I cannot find any questions in GoToMeeting chat box by now.
Okay, good. So let's follow up on that further. Okay, we have another question.
Just a comment, I think, on the open-ended working group process.
Okay. So I hope we can answer to that question in the next session. So I think we could move on to the next session. As I mentioned that there's 3 processes that we could get engaged, and the first one is to be engaged in the zero draft of post-2020 framework. And for this section, this session, we will focus on the development of post-2020 global biodiversity framework and how subnational and local governments can contribute to this development. And I am very pleased to say that today we have Francis Ogwell, one of the co-chairs of the CBD Open-Ended Working Group, with us today. Francis had a bit of a problem last night. There was a blackout and he was running out of shortage of electricity, so he was not joining the session from the beginning. But are you on the line, Francis, at the moment?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here. So can you please introduce yourselves and then explain about the procedure? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think good morning, good afternoon. I don't know that it's afternoon in some other areas where people might be. I might have to go off the video so that I see whether I can try to conserve a little bit of the energy I have. I have about 30, and so you'll bear with me. I have to stay as long as that power can allow me to be with you. So thank you very much to the government of Scotland for giving us this opportunity to participate in this meeting. We are very grateful as the co-chairs of the Post 2020 to be part of you in this online discussion. It is not only you doing it, but I think this has now become almost like a new normal. We are having a number of meetings of the co-chairs and the secretariat, taking into account this same challenge now that is there. So this is something maybe as we were thinking in the beginning, we never knew we could end up doing business like this. But I think it is a reality check for the moment that we have to go through. So we really appreciate this involvement of the co-chairs at this stage in the subnational discussion. And we look forward, of course, to always seeing you participate in our meetings. Having said that, when we look at the pandemic, which is, of course, now a challenge in the world, that is the COVID-19, one would say it has both the positive and the negative. But what is perhaps on the sad side, that is the negative side, is that we have lost and we are continuing to lose lives. So our condolences to those who have died, those families that have lost their loved ones. But also we are still having many people, contracting this virus. And we pray with them that they really heal and we come back to a normal world where we have been before. But on the positive side of it is that if you look carefully, it seems globally the world is in a healing process because of the lockdown that has been pronounced in most parts of the world. So you'll find that pollution, perhaps we have never witnessed this in recent times. Almost no travels now, planes are grounded. Of course, there are other economic consequences to that. Those airlines are having difficulties, the economies are suffering. But on the side of nature, you find that now there's less pollution, there's less degradation, I would think. Globally, you don't have a lot of people going out there to either do deforestation or do other aspects like even illegal wildlife trade. So nature, you would say, is just benefiting one or the other from this pandemic. So initially we had said that 2020 should be the year, the super year for biodiversity. And I think what we see happening around us clearly shows that actually it is possible that we can put biodiversity on a path to recovery, both for planet and people. So that is what the pandemic has given us as a reality check. Here in Uganda, the streets are quiet. There's almost no business, major business taking place. It is clean. You usually have a lot of plastic waste in town, this and that, but everything is just, you can't believe what you see. So there's a way this pandemic is beginning, I think, to also bring sanity into the way humans will perhaps deal with nature after we return. Now, having said that, then I'll try to give you an overview, better overview really, of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, where we had the question about the zero draft. And then secondly, also give you an insight as to where we think we could collaborate with you, the subnational governments, in the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Yes, so that next slide gives you an overview of really what we have been able to do up to this stage, what is still remaining to be done. And you'll see that this process has got 3 stages. Phase 1 was on regional consultations, which began in January last year and ended in May. Phase 2 is on thematic issues, thematic meetings, and this is ongoing. We have achieved most of it. And then phase 3, which is more or less interfacing with phase 2, is on the negotiations themselves. So in gray are those activities that to date we have also completed, in addition to the regional consultations that were successfully done. And I'd like to thank you, Asia Pacific. You were the first region to kickstart that process. And it was very gratifying for me, who had participated in COP10, to see the first strategic plan being adopted there. And then we go back to start the process in August 2019. But also we have had the second one, which took place in Rome just a few months ago. That was in February this year. But we have also had some informal briefing. Last year we did, after the Nairobi meeting, parties wanted us to tell the co-chairs to give an overview of where we had gone then, what was then presenting a preliminary zero draft. And we did that, excuse me. We have had regional, a thematic consultation on resource mobilization, the one on marine, we have had on restoration, we have had on accountability, we have had on capacity building. Those ones happened just at the margins of the second meeting of the Open Working Group. And of course, we are thinking of having now, given, as you said, online meetings now is becoming like a new normal. So we are going to have one on sustainable use. It is being planned, but the one on synergies might take place just at the margin of the next meeting of SAPSA and SBI 3. So that could really be our next target. And then once we've had the meetings of the SAPSA 24th and SBI 3, we should be able to then draft what we are calling now draft 1.0. But perhaps before I get to draft 1.0 is that the meeting of SAPSA 24 is going to concentrate mainly on looking at baselines and indicators, and not necessarily on the negotiation of the text that will be there. We have, of course, tried to, since we broke from Rome, we have tried, and we are continuing to do so, to look at the goals and the targets and trying to take into account the outcome of that meeting, and try to rethink through and recraft those goals and targets as per what we have had. But we wouldn't want the discussion to focus too much on that, but rather on the technical bit of it. And you will be seeing that once that document comes. So we are going to prepare draft 1.0. Someone was asking at where, I think was making reference to zero draft, perhaps where it is now. So zero draft, we are now reworking on it. And when you see the next version of the document that will be shared, it will not be itself 1.0, but you'll be seeing what I'll be saying in the next slide. It will be one that you'll see some changes already made on the goals and the targets. We have consulted very, very, very much on the outcomes of the meeting that took place in Rome, because that is where we get the mandate to do work on that draft. So we hope that the zero draft will be available 6 weeks before the next meeting of the Open Working Group to enable people to review it. And after that, then we could also have the document prepared and then circulated before COP15, just again in time, 6 weeks usually. Of course, we had planned to have the next meeting of SAPSA and SBI in August this year. You can see the date there, 17th to 29th. But the situation is really evolving, and this is not confirmed yet. We could still be having a new communication as well, because we are continuing to look at the situation in the world as it is. If still there are no travels being allowed in most parts of the world, then this date becomes challenging to hold on to. But you will be notified as we keep moving along. As you can see there, we might have COP now in 2021. So the date again is still not very, very clear at this point, but it cannot be either in the early part of the year either. So it is a fluid part, really. Fluid timetable to say. Now let's go to the next slide. So the next slide, by 25th May this year, we are going to have the document I was referring to. It is like a table, generated more or less like a table. You not get all that nice wording of introduction, what like you see the zero draft is, but we have summarized this into a table of goals and targets. And under each of the goals and targets, you'll see the components there. but also we are going to have the monitoring elements, then the indicators, and the glossary as well attached to it, and baseline information, then linkages of SDGs to those goals and targets. This is what we have continuously had. People want to see linkage. So the next report next document that will come around 25th of May will be that, and it will be available for peer review for 4 weeks. It runs up to around June 22nd. And then from there, we work on the document again, from what we've heard and the comments. Then by around July, we should be having now what we call our draft ready for presentation to the next meeting. Again, I said this is on the assumption that the dates of those meetings will remain as they are. But if there are any changes in there, then we can still go along. But for us as co-chairs, we want to work on these timelines. By 25th, we should have a document up there for peer review. We revise it, and then again on 27th, on 6th July, it should be up. That revised version now, still for that, ready now for staff to consider. So this is it in terms of the timelines. You've seen already talked about those ones, Open and Working Group 3, and which is going to be in Cali. Again, the date for that meeting also still very much under review. Next slide, please. Yes, so now let's go to, as I try to end. In fact, before, maybe could we go to the previous slide, please? Previous one. Previous slide. Yeah, I forgot to say something that in addition to those meetings, even if you go to slide two, slide two. Yeah, something I forgot there is that in addition to these meetings you see put here, there are also other virtual meetings that have taken place. As I said, now there's a lot, the Secretariat needed to find ways of making sure we don't lag so much, even if this lockdown will be at one point released or relaxed. So in March, there were 2 ad hoc meetings, 17th to 20th March. We had the ad hoc technical experts meeting on DSI, on genetic resources. 30th March to 3rd April was on the ad hoc technical meeting on risk assessment. Then in April, we had the 17th meeting of the compliance committee under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. That took place from 15th to 17th April. Then 20th to 23rd April, there was the 14th meeting of the liaison group on the Cartagena. The other one should have been, the first one should have been, I think, on the Cartagena Protocol. The other one was on the compliance committee under the Cartagena Protocol. The first one I talked of 15th to 17th April. Then we've had one on 21st to 22nd April. This was the 3rd meeting of the compliance committee under the Nagoya Protocol on ABS. So there are other meetings which are, of course, are taking place, and we know that all that will end up with us as the chair. So could we go to the other slides now? I'll try to finish first. Slide, I think the fourth slide. So what do we expect? How would you expect to work with you in this process of the post-2020? Something I have to say from the beginning, and before I go to this slide, is that when you're talking about biodiversity for the most part is at subnational level. Whether you're talking at ecosystem, whether you're talking at species, whether you're talking about sharing this ABS, the local communities, with IPLCs, it is at the subnational level. So in a way, implementation of this post-2020 will actually take place on ground at the subnational level. So this is why it becomes so important for us to really see that action, which should promote implementation at the subnational level, is properly articulated in the post-2020. Because if nothing takes place there, then we are not implementing the framework. Perhaps we shall just be on capacity building, on developing policies, on those soft things that you can do at national level. But if you want to go down to subnational level, do the action. That is where we need to focus our attention to that. The implementation of the framework, for the most part, on-ground implementation will be at the subnational level. So we really need to take that into account. So issues on landscape and protected area management, where is that? You find it at the subnational level. Then you're talking about science and knowledge, quality of life and health. But of course, most importantly, that even in the post-2020, we are going to see a shift in sustainable production and consumption. We can't continue just the way we are doing business now. It might be risky. So subnational level, really, for you, you are that link for implementation. You are so, so important. And I was saying the other day that most of the action, even if you are going to do whatever work you want to do, you will find yourself in a certain local government, in a certain district. In my place, we call it district. You want to do restoration ecosystem, you find yourself in a certain village, in a certain sub-county, in a certain, district. So that is where the action is. And so really, to involve you in this process is very encouraging to us as co-chairs. So let's go to slide 5. So what then do we expect you to do when you are in these meetings? Most of you might be knowing already that it is when you're there that first you should be developing strong positions. You can develop that in this process of consultation you're having now. But you should be able to find where you can anchor yourself well, what we are calling the like-minded parties here. Who are those people, who are those parties that can help you put these ideas better? Because as co-chairs, we cannot just say we are going to bring all issues the way we think we have heard from you, when it is not going to come out from a meeting like we have had in Rome, or the next one we are going to have in the Cali Open Working Group 3. That is where you have to make sure that those issues are captured, so that when we are working next on the version of the draft, actually that will be the very final document anyway. So as we are working on that, those issues of subnational governments in the post-2020 should be clearly coming out of those meetings. And therefore, nobody will question co-chairs to say, you have put things that were not captured there. So please work hard along those lines to make the life of the co-chairs a little busy in trying to make sure that you're not left behind. As we have said in this process, that it will be inclusive. So we would like to see that all stakeholders are brought on board. And again, if the subnational governments didn't do a good job in the current strategic plan, we should learn from that, see where the weaknesses were, and make sure that we don't repeat that in going forward in the post-2020 framework and its implementation. So when you look at issues which I heard from you, from your presentation, if I may quickly talk about it here. Just a minute. I have it here. This one. There were critical things. There was a slide I saw there about capacity building, about resource mobilization, about climate change and biodiversity. All those. If you are going to address them only at the national level, then you can't possibly make progress at the subnational level. So when we are targeting the capacity building, when we are targeting resource mobilization, we are targeting things to do with ecosystem restoration, anything to do with the climate change and biodiversity, we have to make sure that those things trickle down the subnational level, because those are where the officers are whom we are going to count to do for us the action. So how we are going to resource the post-2020 to really make local governments or subnational governments much more vibrant in the post-2020, to me, I think is going to be very important. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't take a lot of time. And I think that is the last slide is that. The last slide exactly talks about COP15. Of course, the venue still remains China, but the data, as I said, continues to be discussed. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I heard a rooster back then, and I just realized
I have one here.
early in the morning. Or it's very great to see.
Yeah, he's always doing that. Even the secretariat people are saying that rooster is always reminding us about nature. So whenever we are having our online with the secretariat, he's always doing that.
Yes, it's always good to have that intervention, I guess. We are scheduled to have John to explain further about the draft structure. But as Francis, you might have a shortage problem about the electricity. I want to propose to have people to send in questions now.
Yes.
We have John to speak, so that we make sure that we cover that. So whoever has questions to Francis, now is your time. Do you have any questions? You could actually post it in the chat box or raise your hand. Okay, so please keep online, Francis, as long as you can. And but so far we don't have a question, so we will move on. So I'll pass on to John. Can you take a floor, please?
Yes, thank you, Togo. I just want to follow up a little bit on what Francis has introduced and explained to us, more from the perspective of how you can feed into the consultation document that we've made available. You'll find the consultation document on the Zero Draft in Attendify, and when you're considering that consultation document, I think one of the first things I would like to highlight, and something that Francis has already mentioned, is that the Zero Draft has two parts. It has the main part, which has the goals and the targets and the implementing actions, but it also has the monitoring framework that goes along with that, which is going to be updated and will be released for peer review on the 25th of May. And I think it's very important that when people are considering and giving back their written comments on the Zero Draft, that they look at both the monitoring framework and the Zero Draft itself, because they both contain elements that are important. Some of the detail might be in the monitoring framework that links through to the goals. So you should look at both when you respond. The Zero Draft itself, in its current form, has two different sections. So sections B to D set out the goals for 2030 and 2050, and then the series of action targets focused on biodiversity. And then in sections E to H, covers issues around implementation, including the enabling conditions, monitoring, reporting, resource mobilization, communication, etc. It should be noted at this stage that, and as Francis outlined, is that negotiations are ongoing between state parties, and what we're looking for in your feedback is not necessarily detailed drafting suggestions on the targets, but looking at where we can highlight through the upcoming meetings or in conjunction with friendly parties, where from a subnational perspective we see we think there are any gaps or deficiencies, or how suitable we think the goals and targets are, and if there's anything within the enabling conditions that is missing to allow subnational governments to really take forward and implement the post-2020 biodiversity framework. And it's worth considering, and I think we've highlighted this quite clearly, that it's one of the fundamental principles of the convention, is the application of the ecosystems approach. And in principle 2, it sets out that management should be decentralized to the lowest appropriate level, with the aim of achieving greater efficiency, effectiveness, equity, involving stakeholders, using local knowledge, and encouraging greater ownership and participation. So I think this is a fundamental approach that we've been highlighting through these sessions, and so this should be borne in mind while you're looking at the zero draft, that the targets may remain high level, but the indicators and monitoring need to be specific to deliver those. If I could just move on to the next slide. So the consultation document, as I said, covers both the zero draft and the monitoring framework. It has links in there to the discussions and outcomes of the second open-ended working group in Rome, so you can see the discussions between parties there if you weren't able to be there in person. To respond to the consultation, it's through a Google form, which will step you through a series of consultation questions and then automatically send that back to us to collate. And the consultation will remain open until the 29th of May for you to respond to that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, John, for introducing that. So you can refer to the document that identified, it's uploaded, and the instructions there too. So we would like to move on to...
I have something to add. Hello?
Yes, please.
Could I add something a little?
Yes, please, Francis.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the previous speakers really pointed out, made very good addition to this discussion. I just want to also to add a little bit on what he has said. One is that even as you be looking at the next document that will be coming up on 25th of May, it will be also important to look at the outcomes of Rome, because we are building a lot more on that. So if it is on a goal A, goal B, goal C, whatever, you'll see that we've tried our best to balance the ideas that come, even on the targets themselves. So in addition to looking at the monitoring framework, others on the zero draft, but make sure you don't forget to look at the outcomes of Rome, because a lot of ideas came from there, very good ideas, really. Then the other one is that even now, as we have continue to work on the goals and targets, we have actually done our best to reduce on the goals from 5 to 4, and you're going to see them once the this document comes up on 25th of May. But that is taking into account what came out from Rome. So that's why I'm saying you need to look at the Rome outcomes every time you're looking at issues on subnational government. Then secondly, we have still up to now tried our best to leave the targets at 20 of them. We think maybe having more than that, having more targets could be problematic in its implementation. So when you get there to the targets, although we have said this is at subsides, not for negotiations, when you look at the targets which are there, just I think try to look at whether the issues that you're talking of appear in certain targets, and if you have any proposals on a target. But coming up with new ones is what will be challenging for the co-chairs to try to take that on board, because I think even from Rome, most people have the view we should remain at 20. So we've tried our best as we keep working on to remain within there. But we are trying to make sure that stakeholders' views appear in one or the other targets as we move along. So that is the other thing I wanted to if you look at it and you say, oh, the co-chairs have not even added targets beyond 20, it's because we are trying really to remain focused and see how to best accommodate views and make the targets more smarter while maintaining the number at maximum 20. That is what I wanted to add to what the colleague has just talked about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And as mentioned in the chat box, the link to the Rome meeting discussions can be found in Identify and also in CBD webpage. So please. And I think we have a supporter from Rooster also.
But that guy will make it every 15 minutes almost. Yeah, I'm inside the house. If I was outside, you will hear him so loud. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? I want to ask Teru whether if we are receiving any comments or questions in the Japanese. Teru?
I beg your pardon?
Are we receiving any
I
questions from Japan?
I can't find anything from in the GoToMeeting chat box.
Okay, great. Because the whole purpose of this consultation process is that if you do have comments, you could actually participate and make comments to the zero draft. So even if you cannot make any comment right now, we comment on the draft itself. So I think that is clear. So I think we could move on to the next section, which is on the subnational plan of action. Here, I would like to invite Ingrid, a senior program manager at ICLEI, to the plan of action. So
Thank you. Sorry, Togo. Thank you so much. I think there might be a bit of a time delay here. I hope not, and that everybody can hear me. And yes, and that was really a fantastic presentation by our co-chair, and I thank him very much. And I'm also very proud that he's an African and that we have the rooster at the back there. We need that support. I think it set a very good foundation for what I'm going to be talking about. And if you can just move to the next slide, please. So, you know, it's as Francis Ogwal has said, it's really important that we do get the voice and the position of the local and subnational governments mainstreamed into the new global biodiversity framework. And in doing that, in order to do that, one of the things that we at ICLEI, together with our partners, Regions 4, Committee of Regions, Goals, what we've done is to step back a little bit and to say, what did we achieve under the current plan of action that was adopted in Nagoya in 2010? And we've got a document on the Attendify system, which gives a very high-level summary of the achievements. And essentially what we've done is to review all of the work that has been done at different levels of government by many, many different actors at the global level, national, subnational, and local levels over the past decade towards implementing the 2010 plan of action. If you move to the next slide, as I said earlier, the whole idea of this exercise was really to see what do we need in the new global framework. And what we found was that there's a very strong case for a lot more active participation and responsibility by local and subnational governments. And that's why I'm so excited to hear it coming from the co-chair. And that we need to ensure that the local and subnational governments are integrated in the implementation, monitoring, and reporting of our new global biodiversity framework. And what we are calling for as representatives of the local and subnational governments is a new dedicated decision on the role and contribution of these government levels in the new global biodiversity framework, which needs to be significantly stepped up from the current one. And we want to make sure that there are very clear and strong references to the role of local and subnational governments throughout. And if you move on to the next slide, I will just run through some of the main principles and elements that we are asking for. And you will note that many of these address some of the points that Francis Ogwal actually highlighted. So one is in relation to having realistic and feasible objectives and targets that address the contribution that can be made by local and subnational governments. And then very importantly, we need resources to be able to do this work and to take these actions and to make the difference at these levels. So the issue of the mobilization and distribution of resources for increased investment in biodiversity action at these levels is really important. A third thing that we feel is so important is that in order to make good actions and to manage the work that is done, it's important to have good information and make good decisions. So here we're calling for better access to biodiversity data, for monitoring systems, for feedback through reporting, etc., on the goals. And we've also indicated that there are already various mechanisms. For example, there's the Cities with Nature Commitment Platform, which is recognized as where the local and sub-national governments will make their commitments by the SCBD. And John, if you can move to the next slide. The other things that we are calling for is the question of mainstreaming biodiversity in the also at the subnational and local government levels. It should not just be across sectors, but certainly also vertically. And this is, I must say, I'm happy to say that it has been captured in the long-term approach to mainstreaming. Then capacity building is very important, something else that Francis Ogbull referred to. And linked to that is the question of, or the issue of, raising the awareness of the citizens. We've talked about consumption and production patterns having to change. And the levels of government that are closest to the people, the cities, the local authorities, the regions, they are the ones that can have the greatest impact there. But it's not just awareness raising, it's also mobilizing people to take action. And those are just some of the main points that I want to highlight. And before I finish, I just want to indicate what our next steps are. So this document is available on the Attendify app and for people to go and have a look at. And there is, you will also see it's linked to a Google form where we've asked specific questions because it is so important for us to get the input and the feedback from you as representing the local and subnational levels of government. You can go through the questions, you can complete it. It all is done on the Attendify app. And as John has said earlier, we need to have these inputs by the end of this month, 29th of May, and that will then be consolidated and captured in the next version of the document and also in the report that is going to be submitted to the subsidiary body on implementation 3 that will take place in Montreal. Date still to be confirmed, as Francis reminded us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ingrid, for this. So we will have a question for this section, but in the chat box, we have a question from Ping directed to Francis. So maybe if Francis can respond to this also. Francis, are you still there?
Yes,
okay.
yes, yeah.
So can you answer to this question by Ping asking, where does Francis think the role of subnational governments will be on the targets in implementing or in enabling conditions?
Thank you. I don't know whether I should say that myself at this point in time, because I said for us as the co-chairs, we at best need to hear what where you want subnational government to appear or to have a role to play in the different targets. So I think one thing that you could do as a subnational government, as I said I think earlier, is we go through the targets as you'll be seeing them and see whether there are those that explicitly you would see that subnational governments have a role to play there. Of course, even if there are some maybe you want to modify a little bit, but all I can say is that with these targets, the action for these, the implementation of the targets, especially those that is on ground, like ecosystem restoration, anything to do with ecosystem restoration, anything to do with maybe protection of this illegal wildlife trade or something like that. There are some that you see automatically that action definitely has to be well grounded at the subnational level, because a species targeted for illegal trade will live from a certain local government, or from a certain district, or from a certain village. So there are some targets that when you look at them, you will see that actually things will be happening much more at the subnational level. But let's see how that happens. Maybe mainstreaming is both at national and subnational, but there are some of those that you would see that action, you need to build capacity more at the national level. If you're, I'm sorry, not subnational level, if you are going to contain it, because if those authorities at the subnational level can be well facilitated, they can have the capacity to work. Say on some of those I've talked about, then it would be a lot easier for the guys at the national level to see action taking place. So some might be more oriented towards national level, and you should be able to see that as we go along. But others, you might find to be much more towards national level.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Francis. We're pushing on with time, so I think we would like to move on with the next section, where I am supposed to share about the Edinburgh Declaration, and then come back to questions later on to capture if anyone has further questions. So Edinburgh Declaration is the another one process that people can participate. Now this is open for comment shortly via document selection in Attendify, which will be open until 29th of May. Now, this declaration is a political declaration that will represent the high-level aims of subnational local governments for the post-framework. The Scottish Government and the process partners have co-developed this for consideration by subnational governments, and we hope for eventual adaptation by many of you who are participating today. The declaration highlights the role of subnational governments, cities, and local authorities, along with other stakeholders, as key partners in the implementation of framework, and highlights the key role they play in such as reducing threats to biodiversity, meeting people's needs through sustainable use and benefit sharing, developing the right tools and solutions, and actions in implementing and mainstreaming biodiversity across all levels to ensure that support mechanism and enabling conditions are in place to deliver upon the final targets. After, next slide please. After we will close the comment until the 29th. The Scottish Government and Edinburgh process partners will finalize and sign the declaration so that we will submit this to the CBD. However, this will remain open for signature by subnational governments right up to COP15, and we will ask the participants share it widely and encourage as many subnational and local governments as possible to sign up, as this will increase its weight and influence. Our aim is to present the declaration at the side event at COP15, highlighting the Edinburgh process and the support we have gathered over the time to COP15. And to my understanding, in the other regional sessions, there was a discussion on how this declaration can be presented at some of the key international events leading up to CBD COP15, which includes UN Biodiversity Summit, scheduled in September, European Green Week, European Week of Regions and Cities in Brussels, IUCN World Congress in January 2021, etc. So this is the Edinburgh Declaration. So next slide. We are gathering any questions to the Edinburgh Declaration, but not limited to that. So if anyone has any questions, please indicate it in the chat box. And Teru, would you please also check whether if there's a question at the Japanese side also?
There are no questions in GoToMeeting so far.
Okay, great.
And just to briefly follow up on what Sue said in the chat, is that the Edinburgh Declaration isn't available on Attendify yet, but we hope to have it uploaded very shortly. So we'll keep everybody notified as soon as that's available and let you know so you can view it and comment on it.
Thank you very much, John, for that. Okay, so without further ado, we will move. Let's move on to next.
Before we move on, sorry,
No.
Togo, Lena has asked if she can make a comment just now.
Yes. Yes, please, Lena.
Lena Chan.
Is it possible to unmute?
Okay, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I was just wondering whether this is the appropriate time or at some later stage you'll be also asking for comments. I don't know. Togo, would you like to, advise me now?
Yes.
Or there are other options? Okay, it is in a way related to what Ping has asked on how do subnational governments, feedback or get involved. I think besides the LBSAT, the other thing is for the post-20, this is a suggestion, I hope you all would mull over it and think about it. We all agree that subnational cities, everyone, and I think I made that point at the second open-ended group in Rome, to say that everybody needs to get involved, but how do we do it? So we want people to be actively involved. And over the last 10 years, with the SCBD, ICLEI, IUCN, and cities, we have actually developed and tested the Singapore Index, which has different indicators. And in order to actually get data for the indicators, so data is very important. So you want to actually be able to get data so that it would then allow you to track and evaluate your implementation. So you then have to get involved with specific activities so that it would meet your targets or show your improvement or show how you are progressing. And then you have this as an index which has a score. So the Singapore Index becomes a vehicle or a modus operandi or a mechanism for monitoring and reporting data and progress in biodiversity conservation. If all our cities get involved with actually collecting data for these indicators, which, I mean, it's not just a Singapore Index, but there could be other indicators, other indices, then it will allow the CBD then to come up with a mechanism for subnational governments, cities, and the people to actually get involved with the implementation. And very importantly, community scientists. And by organizing people to collect data for the Singapore Index or City Biodiversity Index, it also allows for this great interaction between the government, the people, the city councils, and everybody. So I think we all need to work together. And we talk about resource mobilization. How do we do that? Cities have headquarters of companies. Get the companies to donate some amount of money to actually collect data to galvanize the community and to get things done. Because if we just think of just governments donating money, I think it's not sustainable, it's not easy, especially this time. So we all need to work together, and if everybody chips in. So my suggestion is actually to throw this idea of using this index to actually help galvanize action and implement the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry it took so long.
No, thank you so much. And apologize for my bad time management. We have been having very interesting intervention, and I got carried away, I guess. We also have scheduled that there's a comment from CBD, Oliver, which is a video message. Then we also have participants for today's meeting from Japanese government, and we would like to have a comment from Japanese government side also. So I think we can move on to that. So first, I think we could have Oliver's statement, which is a video message. So please put on this video. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Oliver Hillel, and I'm a program officer in the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity based in Montreal, Canada. I'd like to thank the Government of Scotland, particularly the Directorate for Environment and Forestry and Energy and Climate Change, for the initiative of organizing this Edinburgh consultation as a web-based process. I'd also like to thank the United Kingdom, ICLEI, Regions for and the group of leading subnational governments for the Aichi biodiversity targets as co-organizers of this web consultation. And I'd like to share with you a few words from the perspective of the Convention on Biological Diversity. First, I'd like to share with you 4 ways in which the outcomes of the Edinburgh process can lead and contribute to the Convention. The first one is, of course, our post-2020 instrument, the Global Covenant for the next 10 years and beyond, which relates to all the Sustainable Development Goals. The current framework already includes a lot of options for the engagement of subnational and local governments in targets, for instance, 4, which relates to pollution, 5 and 7, which relate to wildlife and wild species. A lot of that has to do with urbanization. Target 8 on agriculture and other productive landscapes, 9 on water, and 10, which is about the health value of green space and has a specific chapter about cities. Clearly, mainstreaming, which goes from targets 12, 13, 14, 17, and 18, all of them involve multi-level governance, the cooperation between governments. Second, it's the second way in which this consultation can lead or help is that subnational local issues have been incorporated into the long-term approach on mainstreaming and other parallel processes, such as, for instance, restoration, capacity building, and communications. We need to make sure that the point of view of subnational and local governments is considered also, for instance, on resource mobilization and monitoring by the use of the Singapore Index for Cities Biodiversity. The third process is that parties may consider a complementary decision under item 11, which is the item on mainstreaming, as the agenda proposed for the 3rd meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation, which is now scheduled from the 24th to the 29th of August in Montreal. So the idea is that all the lessons learned in implementing Decision 1022, which adopts a plan of action for the engagement of those level of governments, what are the lessons learned? How can we go and strengthen the post-2020 based on that decision through a specific decision for SBI 3? And the last mechanism is your personal contribution to the 15th conference of the parties, which is currently more or less rescheduled for the 1st or 2nd quarter of 2021, still in Kunming in China. So when that happens, there will not only be the conference, but there will be the 7th parallel summit of cities and subnational governments, which is hosted by the city of Kunming and by the province of Yunnan, along with the government of China. So we hope to see you in these 4 processes. Finally, I'd like just to leave, in the last week, we've been discussing a lot in the Secretariat the issue, of course, of the COVID-19 crisis. And I'd like to think that the discussions we've had have a lot of impact on what the Edinburgh process will be discussing. So there's 3 aspects of this crisis which I would like you to consider. The first one, it's clear that this comes from the imbalances on the management of nature. We know the origin of pandemics, so we know this has to do with unsustainable contact with wildlife and domestic animals. So it's clear that nature cannot be ignored as we try to imagine what are the roots and what are the ways that we can avoid this crisis again. We have to factor nature into it. The second point is that we're seeing that it is exactly the level of local and subnational governance that is helping people a lot in these times. So it has become even more clear that the harmonization of policies along the vertical mainstreaming axis is essential. We need to make sure that national, federal governments are saying the same things as subnational and local, as well as global, as in the UN. So this is another point that has become very clear and that might lead you to additional reflections. And the last one is that obviously the big opportunity will be the reinvestment, the restart of our economies after the COVID crisis. That's when we need to be the greenest possible. That's when we cannot afford to lose the opportunity to do things better. So it's a question of the repackaging of a reinvestment for post-COVID. With these thoughts, I'd like to leave you to consider the ways and means in which incorporating nature can help us build a stronger post-2020 global biodiversity framework. From the Secretariat, we thank you and we hope you can enjoy the webinar.
Okay, great. That was a very clear message from Oliver, which I think is following up on what Francis also mentioned and others who have been commenting on through this session. As I mentioned, we also have participants from Ministry of Environment of Japan, Ms. Makiko Yanagiya, Deputy Director, and we've also asked her to give a short comment on her expectations on this process. So can Yanagiya-san, can you unmute yourself and give a short comment on this?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. First, I would like to convey our gratitude to all of you here to make this consultation happen under this difficult situation. This Edinburgh process is very meaningful for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework because, as many speakers have already said, we also do recognize how the subnational government, local government, city has been taking the pivotal role on implementation of the global agenda for biodiversity. Also, unlike the management of greenhouse gas, biodiversity is not only about global commons, but also local commons. And to address the issue of diversity, the local context has to be respected. So it is indispensable to work together with subnational government, local government, cities. So again, thank you so much for organizing this process and your contribution. Then we would like to give 3 comments. Two is related to the post-2020 and one is for planner activities. First, we would like to know, as Lena said, Lena from Singapore mentioned about LBSAP, and we think LBSAP, the Local Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, is very useful too. In case of Japan, the Ministry of the Environment has been supported the subnational and local government to develop the LBSAP and its implementation. So we think LBSAP can be a very useful tool for the practical implementation of post-2020. And if you also think so, we wonder how we can incorporate the role of LBSAP into post-2020. And second, this is an information for you. Japan is making efforts to incorporate the concept of landscape approaches into post-2020. We would like you to know this because the landscape approaches can hugely contribute to the mechanism for cooperation with subnational and the local government and city, as well as other stakeholders. The landscape means geographical area in a holistic sense with all of its wild habitat, land use, human settlements, and stakeholders. And it requires a participatory process, and it also requires integrated planning and management of the certain geographic area. So far, we had some outputs on these approaches, landscape approaches. One is conducted by the United Nations University. It is about the consultation of post-2020 consultation, thematic consultation on landscape approaches. And another one is an informal meeting on landscape approaches, which was organized by the government of the Netherlands and Japan, supported by the United Nations University and PBL from New Zealand. We organized that one day before the OEWZ2, and we have the paper of outputs. So we are very happy to share those outputs with you. So maybe I can send it to the co-chair Togo and Teru, so that you can disseminate that to the participants. And so I'd like you to think about this in the context of the local management, local government, subnational government, and we are very happy to hear your voice on these approaches. Lastly, with respect to the plan of action, we wonder if you would think to incorporate the concept of transformative change from IPBES global assessment. We think it could be an idea to include how to address 8 leverage points for transformative change from your perspective. Given that the transformative change for sustainable society in harmony with nature can be happened only through urgent and concerted efforts across various stakeholders, your commitment to the transformative change is more than encouragement. So these 3 are the comments from us. And again, thank you so much for this, and congratulations. And we are very looking forward to see your view, the output of this process. And please work together, and we would like to learn more from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yanagi-san, for this very interesting input, actually. And let us discuss with Sue and John about how we can possibly upload this document that you have mentioned in our Attendify. And I think same goes to a comment from Lena. I think there's some very valuable comments coming out. I know that I think Singapore is involved in the thematic session that Sue introduced. So I think these discussions can be further deepened in those sessions to be therefore reflected to the final outcome of the animal process. So I am very sorry about this time management issue. So let me just... Yes?
Hello, this is Teruki Suna. I have a request from Dr. Professor Kosaka of Nagoya University.
Okay.
He would like to give a comment very short.
Okay.
Could you invite him? All right, I will invite Mr. Kosaka. Professor Kosaka, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me talk just very briefly. There is also a process by the scientists and also called IPBES, and they're also very much interested in the practitioners' point of views. So your process can be very valuable for these processes as well. And I know municipalities and cities are usually quite shy in front of other cities, but I think this process has been very successful in bringing up the voices of these subnational group entities. And Singapore has played a magnificent role in bringing up these indicator, also as a party to the CBD. Thank you. That's my brief comment.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited that everyone is getting excited and already being part of this process and giving us a very valuable comment. So let me wrap up. My point here in this presentation, final 2 slide, is to go through what we have covered. So first, we have the Edinburgh process report will be finalized based on these consultations in time to submit to Substat 24 and also into the OWG3. And this report will cover the whole process we have just outlined, but we'll mostly describe the outputs of this consultation on the zero draft and framework. Secondly, there will be an update plan of action for subnational and local government that will be submitted to SBI3 in Montreal, scheduled August 24th to 29th, and for adoption at COP15. And finally, there is the Edinburgh Declaration itself, which will be submitted to OWG3 and will be open for signature until COP15. So through all of these outputs, we are looking to set out the importance of subnational government, cities and local authorities in implementing and delivering positive and transformative action for global biodiversity. So your inputs are critical in shaping these 3 outputs, and we urge you to comment on all 3 of the consultation which are now open. But as Sue shared, the Edinburgh Declaration will be posted shortly, which is not uploaded at this point. And this recording of this session will be available. And thematic webinars are running over a long time frame, and you will get more information through Attendify. And we will also share information on the consultation feedback and regional sessions in due course, also through Attendify. And finally, please do regularly check Attendify and turn on your notification, as we will be using this as our main information channel for updates and information on the Edinburgh process. So, final slide. So thank you all for your contributions today. I'm very sorry again for a bad time management. If you have further questions, we would like to receive this through the contact information as it's been indicated on the slide. And again, this is a process, so we expect all of you to participate. Finally, thank you again to Scottish Government and the staff for fantastic work. And I am sure most of us here are very good and pleased to be part of this process that we have put up. Thank you also, Teru, for your team putting this together in Japanese side. So, any final words from you, Teru? Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for all participants from all over the world, and also for Mr. Coach there, and also the thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for all participants from all Asia and the Pacific, and somebody from Africa, and respectable co-chair, Mr. Francis Ogwal. Thank you very much for your input, and also respectable the parties from Singapore and Japan. And thank you very much. You are very, very inspiring comments and inputs. I'm very happy to wrap up such this session in such a way. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we would like to close this session. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.